The Nike Alphafly 3 and the Nike Vaporfly 3, Nike's two premier road racing super shoes, but how do you choose which one is right for you? If you watched any content on this channel, you know that I'm a huge Vaporfly fan. I have raced in all 4 generations of the Vaporfly, and it's continually the super shoe that I come back to. Even when I try other super shoes, I always come back to the Vaporfly because it just works for me. Now, I have run quite a bit in the Alphafly 1 and 2. I have even raced a half marathon and a full marathon in the Alphafly 2. But it's just never been a shoe that has been my favorite. It's never worked for me, and it definitely has never gotten anywhere near what the Vaporfly is to me. But has that changed with the Alphafly 3? And starting with the specs of these two shoes, these are two very different shoes that I find very fascinating because they come from the same brand. They're using essentially the same technologies, though there's a little bit more in the Alphafly 3, but they are implemented in such different ways that they become very different shoes. Now, from a stack height standpoint, they're very similar. They're both within the 40 mil stack height. They both have an 8 mil drop, though I will say the Vaporfly 3 to me feels like a real 8 mil drop, whereas the Alphafly 3 is more 6 to 8, though I'm definitely up on my toes on both of these shoes, which is something that I want. That's a very Nike feel. From a weight standpoint, the Vaporfly 3 is one of the lightest weight super shoes that you can get. It's not the lightest anymore, but it's very close. And for the size of the Alphafly 3, it is surprisingly lightweight. Nike has done an amazing job with what they're calling reductive design, reducing the materials in the shoe to get this shoe to 7 ounces or about 200 grams. It is really remarkable how much shoe is actually in the Alphafly 3 in this very little weight. Now, the big difference here is in the plate configuration. The Alphafly 3 has what I call a high plate configuration, and the Nike Vaporfly 3 has a low plate configuration. I'll get to that in a moment, but these are the two shoes that really started both of these configurations. The Vaporfly 3 came first. That really set the standard that really every other super shoe from every other brand is following. And then the Alphafly 3 came a few years later and set a new standard for how you build a super shoe, and some brands have also been building in that configuration. Now, the biggest difference from a feel standpoint is that the Alphafly 3 obviously has the AirPods or the Air Zoom units in the forefoot, but otherwise these are both full ZoomX midsoles, carbon fiber plate. It's just the addition of the AirPods in the Alphafly 3. And because of those AirPods, I'm going to say that the feel of the Alphafly 3 is bottomless. This is a shoe that it just feels like when you're striking the ground, you're going to continue sinking and the shoe is going to be absorbing all the way down. It doesn't feel like it's going to end, but magically every stride, it does rebound. You do get that energy return. It's a really bottomless, bouncy feeling, where the Vaporfly 3 is a very classic propelling feeling. You're rolling off the plate that's very close to the ground. You're getting the benefit of the flexible plate in the Vaporfly plus the ZoomX foam, and it's a very classic Vaporfly ride. Both these shoes do their job exceptionally well, but they get there in very different ways. Looking at the outsole and contact patch of these two shoes, I was actually quite surprised that the Alphafly 3 wasn't wider. I thought it was over 12 centimeters, but it turns out it isn't. And I think that speaks to how nimble the Alphafly 3 feels on foot. It is a wide shoe, it is a stable shoe, and unlike the previous generations of the Alphafly, it is actually now a nimble shoe. And I think a lot of the geometry of the midsole really speaks to that and really encourages that. Now, in the waist and the heel of both these shoes, they both narrow considerably, especially the Vaporfly 3, and then the heel is extremely narrow in the Vaporfly 3. However, in the Alphafly 3, there is a large medial heel flare that really stabilizes this shoe, really for every runner, especially heel strikers, but everyone is going to benefit from this, making the Alphafly 3 surprisingly stable for just how much foam is there, and traditionally how the Alphafly has always felt. And looking at the outsoles of these two shoes, I think they're both exceptional. In fact, the outsole on the Vaporfly 3, to me, is the best outsole that has ever been on a racing shoe, period. Now, I'm a forefoot striker, so I don't have any of the durability problems in the heel, though I did make a whole video about what causes that. I'll put a link in the description if you're interested in that. But I've gotten exceptional durability in the Vaporfly 3, as a forefoot striker. I have great grip, I have great feel, I have everything I want. It is an exceptional, nearly perfect outsole to me. And the team at Nike definitely learned a lot from the Vaporfly 3 outsole, and they implemented that in the Alphafly 3. There's a lot of the same materials in the Alphafly 3 material, and outsole is exceptional. Obviously, because of the AirPods, you have these two orange pucks on the outsole, which are a different material. They're a firmer rubber. That's what contacts the ground first. But once you get over that initial foot strike, you're coming into the same outsole, especially in the forefoot of this shoe. In the heel, you do have more rubber. It is less prone to abrasion like the Vaporfly 3's rubber on the heel is, but still, it's not the optimal shoe for a heel striker, though I think you'll do better in the Alphafly 3 as a heel striker than you would in the Alphafly 3. And I mentioned the high plate configuration and low plate configuration. So what do I really mean by that? Now, I made a whole video about this, specifically about the A6 Metaspeed series. I'll put a link in the description if you want to get more into that. But it's worth talking about here for Nike because Nike are the ones who really originated both of these configurations. The Vaporfly came first. That was the low plate configuration. Then a couple years later, the Alphafly comes out and that introduced the high plate configuration. What does that actually mean? Well, it's the location of the carbon fiber plate in the midsole of the shoe. As you see on the Vaporfly 3, it starts high in the heel, swoops in the midfoot, comes very low to the ground in the forefoot, and then curves up into the toe spring. Whereas on the Alphafly 3, it still starts high in the heel, drops considerably less in the midfoot, now is kind of actually in the middle, though it's actually on the higher end of the forefoot, and then it curves slightly up in the toe spring. These give very different types of rides, and what you really get here is in the high plate configuration, you get a very bounding and bouncy ride, but the drawback with that is often it's got some instability and it can be mushy depending on the foam. That isn't the case in the Alphafly 3. And then in the low plate configuration, you get a very rolling and stable ride, but it can feel overly aggressive and firm to many runners because you are essentially running on the carbon fiber plate. So if we look at a cross section across the forefoot of the shoe, this is essentially what we're getting. In the Alphafly, you have two independent AirPods. There isn't any material around them, especially where that cross section is. So when you're compressing that, you're compressing everything between the plate and the ground essentially. So all of the resilience of the Alphafly is coming from pressing the material between the carbon fiber plate and the ground, which are the AirPods, and that is the ride and the feel of the Alphafly. Where in the Vaporfly, as you see, the plate is much lower, so when you compress that, you're actually compressing all of the foam in the midsole, but generally you're compressing the foam between the plate and your foot, so you're going to get a different type of ride. Now what that often results in, as I said, is instability in the high plate configuration, though interestingly and counterintuitively in the Alphafly, because you have two independent AirPods in the forefoot of that shoe functioning independently, I find the Alphafly to be a little bit more stable than, say, the Metaspeed Sky Paris, which is just foam, which to me is very unstable. But still, you do get some side-to-side movement, and when you compress that, you're really pressuring everything between all the leverage of the plate and the ground, and that's where you're getting the resiliency. You're getting the explosive power of everything between the plate and the ground. Whereas in the Vaporfly 3, something that a lot of people don't like, especially with ZoomX foam, which is a softer foam, you get a lot of sink in the forefoot. That puts all the compression right under the foot, between the foot and the plate. Some people don't like that, but you do get a very explosive and very different type of propelling forward from that type of configuration. Both work exceptionally well, and I think in these two shoes in particularly, they both work nearly perfectly for what they're designed to do. Moving to the upper and fit, and starting with the Alphafly 3, I'm going to say flat out that one of the biggest problems I've had with the previous generations of the Alphafly have been the booty upper. It's just never worked for me. It's always been a toe crusher, a toe killer. It's never giving me the lockdown I wanted, but it's all changed here in the Alphafly 3. And a lot of that is the Atom Knit 3.0 material of this upper, the yarn that this upper is actually made out of. It's much softer, much more compliant to the foot. It actually holds the foot down now. It wraps around the foot. It doesn't just wrap over the foot, it wraps around the foot. It works exceptionally well. Additionally, there is some padding in this tongue which take the lace bite out, but also allow for it to kind of suction cup to the foot. It really wraps around the top of the foot. Now I'm a runner with neither wide nor narrow feet, but I do have high arches and high volume feet. So this padded area in the tongue area sits on the top of my foot perfectly, holds my foot down perfectly, especially in the midfoot. In the heel of this shoe, if you've ever worn an Alphafly, especially the Alphafly 1, you know how hard it was to get into. However, there's a softer material back here which make it easier to pull the Achilles flare back to get your foot in here. It's actually easy to get your foot into this shoe, but once you pull the Achilles flare back, it comes back because it rebounds. There's a lot of padding back here, and then it wraps around your Achilles. So it's soft on your Achilles, but it also locks your heel into this cup that's back here. The heel counter in this shoe is not the sturdiest, but there's a deep pocket here with all this padding and this soft material here. So the heel hold in this shoe is exceptional. Now, in the forefoot, I think this is probably the biggest change in this upper for me, is that while this isn't a wide shoe, it's still a Nike racing shoe, this is wider than you would expect it to be. And the toe box is squared off much more than you would expect it to be. So there's a more natural swoop to the toe on the lateral side around the toes, giving your toes much more room. And most importantly, there's a lot of room now for the big toe in this area because there's a very minimalist toe bumper in this shoe, but that keeps this softer material up off of the feet and off of the toes, specifically the toenail, which has always been the crusher, the problem in the Alphafly for me, and has a lot of room in here. So the fit in the toe area has given me zero problems. Now, as I said, the Alphafly 1 and 2 both were toe crushers and toenail killers for me. I still have toenail issues because of both of those shoes, but in this shoe, I've had zero issues, and it works very, very well. So I am very pleased with this upper, and I think to me, with all the changes in this shoe, that is the biggest thing that makes this shoe much more usable for me, is the fit. Additionally, this is my standard US men's size 9, so it's true to size for me, and I have, again, perfect fit in this shoe. Additionally, in the true to size, I'm getting the AirPods right in the perfect spot on my foot, which is just a little bit behind the ball on my foot. So the fit and the feel of the shoe is spot on. And moving to the Vaporfly 3, I'm going to say that this is one of my favorite uppers that's ever been on a shoe. I love the outsole on this shoe, but I also love the upper. This upper has been nearly perfect for me, and I have done everything in this shoe in multiple pairs of the Vaporfly 3. Racing, training, easy running, interval work, track workouts. I've done everything in this shoe, and this upper has never let me down. Now, as I said, I'm a runner that has a high volume foot. So the volume in this, especially in the midfoot, works exceptionally well for me. I get very good lockdown. I get very good volume in the toe box area, though I do see where there is a problem for people that have a lower volume foot or a very narrow foot, is there is a lot of material here at the bottom of the eyelet chain, so it does get a little baggy here, but it shouldn't give you any performance issues. It just kind of looks strange sometimes. But for my foot, I don't get a lot of bagginess there. The volume in the toe box is nearly perfect. I've had no toenail issues. I've had no toe issues. This is narrower than the Alphafly, but still I have no issues in this fit. This is a very much race fit shoe, a very Nike race fit. And it's something I've always liked about the Vaporfly, is that tight race fit. This has that, and this upper is, again, very compliant to the foot, wraps around the foot, does really well. We have a much more stout heel counter in this shoe, and we have the classic piece of padding that goes around the top that anchors your heel into this shoe. So heel lift in this shoe should be a non-issue because there's a lot of padding back here that keeps your heel locked in. But generally speaking, this has been one of my favorite uppers really on any race shoe, really any running shoe ever, and it's worked exceptionally for me. And the fact that I am comparing the Alphafly 3 upper to this tells you how good the Alphafly 3 upper actually is. Moving to the ride of these two shoes, and starting with the Alphafly 3, this is the definition to me of what a high plate configuration shoe should feel like. It feels bottomless and it's bounding and bouncy, meaning when I sink into this shoe, it feels like I'm going to go forever, but then the shoe has a ton of rebound, has a ton of energy return resiliency, and it really pushes me out of my foot strike, and then it's a very bounding feel. So this shoe actually works very well to extend my stride because it's so compression and then energy return, and it's just bounding. It's really a remarkable ride. Now, I think that's what a lot of people have always liked the Alphafly 4, the platform in general, is that it's very bouncy and bounding. However, I always found the Alphafly 1 too uncontrollable, and I didn't like the decoupled heel and toe in that shoe because it just felt too mechanical. The Alphafly 2 was just too big, too booty. It just looked like running in mud to do anything in that shoe. But this shoe is very nice. And I'm going to say a lot of the design changes they've done in this shoe, the two biggest ones are the continuous midsole design. It runs like a normal shoe now. And then the reductive design, where they're reducing all the material. They're actually taking a lot of material out of this shoe. In fact, it's kind of shocking to see just how much material is removed out of this midsole. Yet there's no soft spots, there's no dead zones in this shoe. It just runs really well. Those both make this shoe run very naturally. It feels like a normal shoe, but also it's now an agile shoe. The problem I had with the Alphafly for running marathon paces is it was very good to lock into your marathon pace and then stay there. That's what this shoe is designed to do. But if you ever needed to accelerate, like you got dropped by your pace group, like in a water station, for example, the chaos of water stations in big marathons, and you need to catch back up with your group, and you needed to kind of sprint to get there or really pick up the pace, forget it. That was never going to happen in the Alphafly, especially the Alphafly 2. In this shoe, though, this shoe is agile. You can pick up the pace in this shoe at any point. Because of that energy return, because of the bounding and the bounciness of this ride, this shoe is great for locking into a pace, but if you need to pick up from that locked in pace and go faster, this shoe will do it. If you need to slow down and go slower than your marathon pace, this shoe will do it because it runs more naturally. You don't have to worry about the decoupled heel and forefoot, which was always a mess in the previous two Alphaflys. This shoe is now very versatile, very agile, and very fast for a lot of different types of running, from marathon pace all the way down to maybe 5K and even 1 mile pace. This shoe works really well. Though this is Nike's premier marathon racer, and a lot of the tech in this shoe is really optimized around the marathon distance, the longer distance really locking into that long distance. So this is an exceptional marathon racer and an exceptional road racer in general now. And moving to the Vaporfly 3, everything I just said about the Alphafly 3 applies to this shoe. This is agile, it's versatile, it will do everything. You can lock into a pace, you can accelerate. It does everything, and it really does it well. But the difference with this is the ride. It's a little bit more direct because you're running with the low plate configuration, which puts the plate right near the ground in the forefoot. So you get a more rolling, more propellant ride because you're not only flexing the plate and compressing the foam, and that's giving you the spring forward in this shoe, but it's just a more stable, more propulsive ride than the boundingness and the bounciness of the Alphafly 3, which to me makes this shoe just that much more versatile. This is really like a racing flat of old. It's a modern super shoe. This is all of the geometry, all of the materials of a modern super shoe, but it feels way more minimal than you would think. A lot of the other super shoes in this category that compete directly with this shoe, like the Asics Metaspeed Edge Paris and other low plate configuration shoes, which are very good, still feel like there's a lot of foam. They still feel very bulky. The Vaporfly has always felt special because it just feels minimalist. This feels like old racing flats. This feels kind of like the old Nike Streaks, in that you just feel low to the ground, you feel connected to the ground, and you feel like the shoe disappears on your foot when you're racing in it, no matter what the distance. With the update to the Vaporfly 3, Nike gave us a little bit more foam in the forefoot, which made this just kind of cruise through those steady state running of a marathon much better. I think for non-elite runners like myself, I think this is an exceptional marathon racer. However, the Alphafly 3 is probably a little bit more bounding and bouncy to actually run in. But if you want a more direct, more nimble ride, this is the shoe. Now, I absolutely adore this shoe because it does feel like a minimal racing flat and it disappears on your foot. But that's really the biggest difference, is that this shoe will disappear on your foot. The Alphafly 3 will be always present on your foot. It will do very well, but it won't disappear like the Vaporfly 3 does. And another way of illustrating this difference is with my performance matrix. Now, these are 4 pace zones that I would expect really any performance trainer or super shoe to be able to handle. And if we map the Vaporfly 3 on here, it really wants to live in this area. Now, the sweet spot of the zone is the red or orange. That's really where the shoe's happiest, and then the range is the yellow area. And the Vaporfly 3 really is that shoe that wants to sit in threshold, towards the edge of threshold, getting in a max effort, because it just wants to go faster and faster and faster. It is an exceptional shoe for really pushing the edge of what your fitness is capable of. Now, putting the Alphafly 3 on here, the range is a little bit broader. Now, the sweet spot of the shoe, I think, really is in threshold, maybe a little bit more into steady. Now, that makes sense given that the Alphafly 3 is really optimized around the marathon distance, that longer distance, where you do want to sit in the steady to threshold range. But surprisingly, the shoe can pick up and go into max effort, and I think it can match the Vaporfly 3 now in that max effort range. I do think the Vaporfly 3 has the edge there, especially if you're doing shorter running, like a 5K and anything shorter than that for road racing. But again, the Alphafly 3, being as nimble and versatile as it is now, is going to do very well in that area. But it is really designed to really be happiest in that threshold area. And again, that makes sense for marathon racing. So what's the verdict here? Which one of these two shoes do I choose? Well, still, in 2024, I'm still going to pick the Vaporfly 3. If I can only have one of these, this is still the shoe that I want. But it is really, really close. I would not be disappointed if this was the only super shoe from Nike that I could now own, because I can do everything in this shoe that I want. It's just going to give me a slightly different ride. It gives me that bounding and bouncy ride that's really reminiscent of the high plate configuration. Now, I really do prefer the feel of the Vaporfly. This to me is just the more versatile, and I've done a lot of data videos recently. I'll put a link in the description to one I just put out, where this shoe actually is shown to be the most efficient for me. Again, it's a small data set, it's got a lot of variables in it, but this shoe just continues to show that it's the most efficient for me. However, the Alphafly was not far apart from that at all. And you can see that here. Now, this is 2K of my marathon pace and then 1K of a little bit slower than 5K pace for me. And as you see, there's not a lot between these two shoes. The Alphafly 3 is a little bit faster, but in the bigger data set, again, the video I referenced, link in the description, there's some other variables in here that actually show the Vaporfly 3 is a little bit more efficient for me. But as I just said, I wouldn't be disappointed owning only one of both of these shoes, though ideally I want both. And to me, that's the big story with these two shoes. As much as I am a big fan of the Vaporfly, especially the Vaporfly 3, I have always loved this shoe. I will always pay attention to this shoe. Now, in 2024, the fact that I would be totally fine just owning this one shoe and not having a Vaporfly is a testament to how good this shoe is. Now, next year in 2025, we will get the Vaporfly 4. And that's going to be an interesting comparison, because there's also another shoe that's either coming out this fall or next year as well, and that's the Streakfly 2, which will now be a plated shoe. It's basically going to be a Dragonfly for the road, which sounds fantastic for shorter distance, really everything up to 5K. And with the Alphafly at the top end as the marathon racer, where does that leave the Vaporfly 4? Now, I still think the Vaporfly 4 will be the all-arounder from Nike, but I'm wondering how much they're going to really be able to fine-tune that shoe, given that they have their top-tier marathon racer and they'll have a top-tier shorter racer. Can they really optimize the Vaporfly for something now very specific? In the leaked images we've already seen the reductive design is there, the cutting away of the midsole, the exposing of the fly plate, all of that stuff. So next year is going to be a very exciting year, and I cannot wait to make the Alphafly 3 versus the Vaporfly 4 comparison video next year. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you find this content useful, consider subscribing. You'll see more content from me pop up in your feed. If not, drop a like on this video because it helps this channel continue to grow, which I always appreciate. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.